This video is a series of videos that revolve around the theme of creating a broad list of solutions in the improve phase of a DMAIC-based process improvement project. And we'll be taking a look at benchmarking and best practice tours as one of those techniques. The specific learning objectives are to reveal a project scheduling dilemma that should be addressed before you and your team go out and do benchmarking. We'll also be taking a look at laying out a strategy for more impactful best practice tours. Okay, I've cleaned up my screen just a little bit, and in a moment we're going to be taking a look at some best practices for benchmarking and best practice tours. But I want to make sure that we're all kind of on the same page in terms of where we are in this data-driven process improvement methodology called DMAIC. And we've walked out of the analyze phase with these root causes, a handful of them that we're trying to build solutions around. And we've probably done some brainstorming to identify possible solutions. We probably use that possible solutions document that we were adding to throughout project initiation and voice of customer interviews. And so we've got some solutions. What we're now hoping for is there a way that we can use benchmarking and best practice tours to add to that solution list? The problem, though, that we have is the fact that we've been consuming a lot of time going through all of this data-driven problem solving. If you remember in earlier videos, we talked about how each phase of the DMAIC, you can time box and expect a certain amount of time to be used when you're working through all of these tools and activities. And the general rules of thumb that I give for define, measure, analyze, improve, and control, I know we're not yet in control, but I'm going to add it here, is the old 30-30-10-10-10 rule. The problem that I see most frequently with benchmarking and best practice tours, which is typically one of the tools that we take a look at in the improve phase to add to our solution list, is that the team has used up all of its time. They've used the 30-30-10-10-10, but gone a little bit long in maybe define and measure and heck, probably analyze as well. And to calendar and schedule the time for the team to leave their work locations and go and visit other company branches or other non-competing partnering suppliers or other organizations that do similar types of things to do benchmarking against, or the time it takes to schedule visiting a world best-in-class provider of a particular service to get some ideas. They've run out of time. They're only days or hours away from being required to come up with that solution implementation plan and the end of the tollgate review of the improve phase. And so we tend to scrap this. And I'm not saying that you don't want to do benchmarking or best practice tours. You do. They're really important. But the key to making them effective is you want to start scheduling your benchmarking and best practice tours, not in the improve phase where the tool is identified and used, but you want to start scheduling way up here, early in the define phase, where you may not know what the solutions are early in the define phase, but you certainly know what some of the problems are. And so you can identify groups that are addressing that problem better than your organization or your work group is. And you want to start scheduling it in the define phase so that when you have some downtime with the team, while they're waiting maybe for that data to come back from the measure phase, they can go out and visit some of these other organizations. It takes time to calendar and make sure that everybody has free time. You're doing that way up front. Then you're collecting and recording your observations from these benchmarking and best practice tours. And it's in the improve phase that you'll open up that list of notes and see what ideas that you recorded in these benchmarking and best practice tours attacked specific root causes that you can then add solutions to help with your broad list of solutions that you'll consider as part of the solution implementation plan. The key to effective benchmarking and best practice tours is early scheduling. Let's take a look at another strategy that I think is really important when you're considering best practice tours. When I'm considering who to go and visit for these benchmarking and best practice tours, as I'm scheduling their visits and site tours early in the define phase, like we talked about earlier, I also want to be mindful of a particular strategy I like to use for who to make the request to. And one of the strategies that I use is I think back to our change management equation related to effective process improvement project results. The old Meyer model equation that talks about how the quality of the solution is important, but you also need to be mindful of user acceptance to the solution. Part of whom I'm scheduling to visit is to help me with user acceptance and buy-in for future state. So I will consider taking a look at other branches that are doing a really good job with the problem area that we're looking at, knowing that sometimes visiting peer branches and seeing that they've been able to crack the nut, so to speak, can help increase user acceptance and buy-in first for my team, but then also for the other process workers and process owners that I'm going to have to roll these eventual solutions out to. By doing this, those internal groups often share similar suppliers, they have similar databases and similar tools that are being used to help manage this process, and we'd see how they've been able to optimize in their given environment. I do it a little bit to come up with solutions, but I do it also to help increase buy-in. After I've considered that, there is another group that I'm thinking about for benchmarking and in particular for best practice tours. And the group that I want to be looking at are, I want to take a look at groups that are among the best at performing the particular types of activities that we're struggling with in our problem areas. I'm not that interested in benchmarking against my peers or doing best practice tours of similar organizations that do it just as poorly as myself. I'm going to use myself as an example here. In my environment in higher education, it's a common practice to go visit other higher education institutions to get ideas. But one of my team member colleagues once said it, and it's kind of crude, but I think he nailed it on the head. He said, when you benchmark against crap, the best that you can hope for is a level just below crap. And so when we were taking a look at another higher ed institution that handled financial transactions, we did it poorly. They did it just a little bit better than poorly. We did not get that great of an insight in terms of what we could do in future state. Instead, we wanted to take a look at groups that were world best in class. We took a look at some regional banking institutions. A lot of the financial transactions involved the movement of paper information. And I know we wanted to consider ways to reduce paper and make it digital, but for those paper transactions, we took a look at world best in class providers that handled paper transactions. We took a look at FedEx, the U.S. Postal Service. For some of our visits, we considered what is Amazon doing? Now, higher ed and Amazon are not the same, but there were a lot of great ideas that we got from taking a look at those world best in class providers. Be careful in benchmarking just against your peers or touring just peers. You may not get the insights that you're really looking for. I find that by taking a look at the early scheduling, the internal visits to help increase user acceptance and buy-in, and considering world best in class providers, we end up making this particular tool, benchmarking and best practice tours, a much more effective technique at getting those additional solutions that really address root causes. In future videos, we'll be taking a look at ways to then take the many solutions that we've identified through these various techniques and then score and sift and winnow to come up with the best of the best solutions for our final solution implementation plan.